And I'm going to broadcast. All right.
Awesome.
Good to go.
We're good to go. Cool. All right, well, let's get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is John Horning, and I am the Executive Director of WildEarth Guardians. Great to have all of Guardians members and supporters who are joining us from many places, mostly from Colorado, given the content of today's webinar. I appreciate these opportunities to bring our members and e-activists together. It's always great together, but especially so in these more challenging times. We call these WildEarth webinars. It's the latest edition. We bring together local and regional issue experts, people from frontline communities, elected officials, and of course, WildEarth Guardians staff to talk about critical issues at a critical time. Our purpose is to inform, inspire, and activate Guardians like you to help us confront powerful extractive industries, demand greater leadership from our elected officials, and it's all about solving the nature and climate crises and creating the kind of world that we want. Today, we'll be talking about efforts to ensure that the state of Colorado and Governor Jared Polis in particular do their part to advance solutions to the climate crisis. And since we have a climate denier in the White House and nearly every climate policy is or has been systematically dismantled by the Trump administration, states have an opportunity to fill the leadership vacuum by advancing solutions that both wean our nation from its dependence on fossil fuels and support a swift transition to clean energy. With us today are Lucy Molina, a self-described warrior and a spirited community activist who lives in the Denver suburb of Commerce City, who, among other passions, has fought against the Suncor oil refinery. Also with us is Ean Thomas Tafoya. Ean is the Colorado field organizer for the organization GreenLatinos. And I noted that Ean is an Earth Day baby, born on Earth Day, so he's got that credibility. And of course, Jeremy Nichols, WildEarth Guardians Climate and Energy Program Director. Welcome to each of you. It's good to have you.
Thank you.
So I thought I'd start just by giving both Lucy and Ean the opportunity to introduce yourselves to our audience, just to tell them a little bit about who you are and what matters to you and what struggles you're currently engaged in. So if you'd like to go first, Lucy, please.
Okay, buenas tardes. Good afternoon. My name is Lucy Molina. Yo soy Lucy Molina from Commerce City, Colorado. And I'm a mom. Soy una mamá. I'm a mom, which is what inspires me to fight for my children and for yours. Yes, I have. I'm pretty involved in my community. I have ran for office. I really do say I didn't run for office. I ran for my life, really. Living in Commerce City, as many know, we have no drinking water. We have Suncor, which is, I call it my deadly neighbor here, killing us, slowly here. And we also have, we have fracking up in the north. We have the arsenal here in the center, in the core, where my children's high school is at. And so I call Commerce City, unfortunately, I call it an environmental vomit. You know, we have so many issues that have directly impacted our families, like my children and my mom. My grandmother passed away from leukemia. We're struggling, fighting with cancer right now. So we have a lot of health impacts that I come to find out as a mom, lately, the last few years, what my neighbor has been spitting out here and crapping in our neighborhoods. So now our families are left with the, with the funerals, with the health impacts, with the bills, with all these issues that we're dealing with right now. So that is, I really come as a mother, really as a mom. I'm a single mom here in Commerce City. Affordable housing is what we have here, which is one reason I moved over here after I lost my business. And it's costed me pretty much, our lives here, having all these health impacts. And in fact, today at 3, I'm going to Children's Hospital because my daughter she's got appointment for her migraine headaches. So she's in like seeing specialists, which is kind of unfair. She's a teenager. She just turned 14 and it's like, it sucks that she's got to deal with this pretty much the last 10 years of her life. So that's a little bit about me. I guess we're gonna have some more opportunity to continue talking about who we are. I do want to let everyone know that we are in Adams 14 district, which is where my children go to school at. We are the lowest performing district in the state. If that's not a sore thumb, that is, we almost lost our only high school here in Commerce City. So, that is kind of the struggles that communities like mine have to fight for. We really face environmental injustice and educational injustice, really. So yeah, I can go on forever. So I'm, plus I'm a girl, ¿verdad? So I will shoot it over to my most respected and my friend Ian, that I really look up to, and I learned so much from him these years, and I'm so thankful that I get to work along with him, and encourage the youth to step it up, because we need to stand up for ourselves. Gracias.
It's great to have you, Lucy.
Okay, my name is Ean Thomas Tafoya. I would like to start by just acknowledging that we're on Indigenous stolen land. Myself personally here in the Ute, Cheyenne, Arapaho. My ancestors Hickory Apache or Dinde from the headwaters of the Rio Grande. So I'd just like to start there. Yes, my birthday is Earth Day, and I always saw myself as an environmentalist, but I was always kind of one of those environmentalists that was about my own personal choice, whether that be transportation, food justice, how I handled my own personal waste. It really wasn't until I was in my 20s and I was out of university that I started working in the government. I've worked for 3 branches of local government: the public defender's office, the mayor's office, and the Denver City Council office. And in that time, I really got a look under the hood, and I didn't like what was happening there, in particular when it came to human rights violations, in my opinion, both in the treatment of the unhoused and also a widening of a highway in my community. Just south of where Lucy lives is Globeville, Lyria, Swansea. I lived in the neighborhood just south of that. It's called Cole. I live next to a giant train intermodal change, highway, dog food factories. From my own house, I could see a smokestack still to this day. It's no longer operating, but you could see it from my house as a legacy of this conversation. I was so disenfranchised and disillusioned with the system that I too ran for city council when I was 28 years old in Denver in opposition to this highway. And then after that, I lost. I thought, I'm gonna go make money now. So I went and I did government affairs work for a corporation. Within 11 months, I was being accused of being a labor organizer, which I might have been. My mom was in a union. I wasn't handing out union cards, but I definitely call out the injustice when you see it, especially for low-wage workers. I ended up traveling for a year. I went to all the Western states, all the national parks. I climbed the pyramids in Teotihuacan in Mexico. I traveled to multiple states in Mexico. And what I became really grounded in was, again, feeling this calling to go back to protecting the earth. So came home, got involved with the Colorado Latino Forum, which is a nonprofit here in town. And they brought me on to be the environmental justice committee chair. Ended up fighting this highway, ended up fighting this refinery, ended up meeting Lucy and a lot of these people. And that work began taking me around the state. Eventually, it took me to Washington, D.C., where I had a chance to meet the GreenLatinos, which is the national environmental justice conservation organization that networks people like me. I think Lucy probably would say this. I think you feel so alone. not only do you feel alone because you're fighting, you feel alone because you're from the community that is the front line. And then moreover, in the boardrooms, in the nonprofits, even the environmental nonprofits, and in the halls of Congress, the people don't look like me. They didn't come from my background. They don't eat my comida. They don't understand how we break bread. And that's okay that we're different, but they're also not willing to come together to fight for justice. And so the GreenLatinos hired me as the first organizer in the United States. I've been working for GreenLatinos for about a year and a half now. And I believe that my job is to take my experience in campaigning. I've also worked on a lot of campaigns, probably 20, Green Earth initiatives, mental health initiatives, RTD races, multi-county. I feel like my job is to help network with people and tell them they're not alone, support and educate them. And then we're empowered to make the change. And, before I was in politics, I guess before I was in government, I was an early childhood educator, and I was a Montessori educator. And so I bring that attitude of supporting people where they are in place and educating them to move forward.
Well, thank you both for sharing some of your personal stories and the struggles of doing work that matters and that and the struggles of your community and your families. I'm thrilled to have you here today. I thought maybe we just jump right in. Lucy, you mentioned Suncor. I think you alluded to it as well, Ean. Suncor listens. All right, let's raise hell with Suncor. But, I just have done a little research, and Jeremy's told me about it. Was reading an article in Westward. God, it's a plant that's been around 90 years. And as much as the industrial part of Denver, greater Denver, has changed, one thing that hasn't changed is Suncor. Talk about what Suncor is for the audience and what the issues are and what you all are struggling for through the lens of your families, your communities, and the broader climate issues as well.
Yeah, well, I always say I'm not an expert. I'm like, I always want to put the mom perspective, what do I deal with on a daily basis? Like, why I really respect the work that Ean does and Jeremy and a lot of these organizations that I partnered up the last couple of years to educate myself, because I was wondering what was wrong with my children. Okay, I was threatened with truancy by my district. My doctor's like, you got to move out of here. You got to, you're living next to this oil refinery. Then when I sought help with my local representatives or people that I thought might help me, I was told that my problems were genetic. And forgive me that I get Ian knows this, I get very emotional. I cry a lot because I get very angry because, I was told it was genetic. I was told there was nothing they can do. So clearly I was like, well, one, I have no representation. I have no funding, I'm poor. So how can I go against this? The thing is, like, I saw my grandmother dying of leukemia. I mean, if you've ever seen somebody die of cancer or leukemia or some, death like that, it's horrible. You die a little bit with them every day, So when we found out that it's not genetic, they do these tests. Even my aunt, we're going through chemo right now, said that it's not genetic. It's not from our, our family lines. We don't have that. So it's got to be exterior. So that to me, it's like, okay, then it's not, it's what we're eating. It's what we're breathing. It's what's around us. Now, we grew up on 80216, which is on 58th in Washington. My grandma's house is still there. My aunt's still there. And then of course I'm on this other side. I kind of had to, I say I came out with like kicking and screaming because I was losing my family, okay? Without having representation, without having the funding, not knowing where to go. I saw that, Suncor funds like school projects, it funds like parks, it funds fiestas, Cinco de Mayo events, whatever, all these, to keep us, I call them like Band-Aids, right? I call them like, this is how they keep us dumb enough to, you know, just be thankful for a meal. No, I say this is environmental racism, okay? When I was told by my own representatives that there's nothing they can do. I think that is environmental racism when also the state of Colorado punishes or fines Sunco for $9 million, and our own council or our own government is trying to rob our own community when this is for impacted citizens, like impacted community, which is us. Okay, so that to me is environmental injustice. Okay, like I said, I'm not an expert. I know when Ean takes this over, he has a lot more that he can add, which is that what I learned, but I bring my perspective as a mom, the things that I deal with, having to go to the doctor, not able to work a regular job, you know, because you're always at the clinic. You have to go pick up your kid from the doctor, from the school, because they have migraines. The school making you feel like you're a bad mother because your kids miss so much school. And then I get to they send me to court. They put a social worker to come to my home. I mean, that was very invasive, intrusive. It was, I mean, we're Mexicans are very proud Latinos. And that to me was very, like, it made me feel like a very bad mother. You know, my son is having bloody noses at school. So then, yeah, it might look like maybe people don't, you know, I'm not hurting my kids. So that's kind of what it seemed that I, as a mom, was going through because of the health impacts and the mental and the emotional situations that we were going through because of cancer, because of leukemia, because of asthma, because of, you know, surgeries on a 4-year-old, you know, things that are not really normal, I would say, in regular communities. Yeah. I tried to move up to north. Then I found out they're fracking where I was gonna move. And I was like, well, then I'm literally fracked if I stay and fracked if I go. Who's speaking up for me? Nobody was speaking up for me and my child. So I really literally had to go. I always say I was not invited. I crashed the party, you know, I included myself because I saw that there was lack of inclusion. Every time I went to testify at any platforms that, you know, the COGCC or the state or any platforms like that, there was maybe 1 or 2 people that look like me. And so I figured nobody was speaking for me and my child or for my neighbors. So I had to step it up myself. And I'm still learning. I'm not gonna say I know everything. I'm still learning. I'm glad that that I was part of this along with Ean and a lot of the awesome activists and groups that are part of this movement, testifying this year and Senate Bill 181 last year. I thank my representatives that, you know, took up the courage to step up for us. And I hope that people support those leaders that are supporting communities like ours and fighting the environmental injustice. So, yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's, I've learned that the Colorado bill that passed last year, the year before, has a focus on climate justice, addressing communities that are most harmed. And I'm curious to hear, Ean, from your perspective, both how Suncor fits within that, and also if you could comment on Governor Polis and what your sense of how he's doing,
well,
not just broadly, but also on through the lens of climate justice. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Well, and interestingly, I mean, before we go there, Ean actually was a part of a panel earlier today that the U.S. House Natural Resources Committee set up to talk about environmental justice in Colorado. And he was one of several panelists, including State Representative Dominique Jackson, great champion of climate and justice here in Colorado. And Ean, maybe before we go into Governor Polis and House Bill 1261, maybe if you want to just share a little bit about what happened today, and what did you tell the Natural Resources Committee?
Sure, I would love to read my remarks. I just want to go back one step really quick.
Sure.
And that is really give people context about what Suncor Refinery is. Suncor is part of what can clearly only be seen as white supremacy and redlining that has resulted in multiple industries in one community. You know, we can talk about Suncor, but you also need to talk about it as a community that is completely ringed by highways. I mean, there are 3 highways that run completely around this community. You have asphalt facilities, marijuana grows, recycling and industrial processes. There are many, many, many people and many, many, many kind of companies that are in this community. It is also sited well within what is now becoming a fastly urbanizing suburban area, where the land values in Denver are becoming so high that these brownfields and proximity to pollution for attainable housing is even more of a great problem, because they want to build more people into it rather than helping the people that are there now. And the last thing I want to say about Suncor is this Canadian company is using tar sands and pumping this slurry in the face of climate denial to our community. And when you're the refinery, you're the recipient of all of the environmental degradation that's occurring in the states around us. And so I really want to focus that in for people. Yes, I was invited to be part of a panel, a Climate Justice Now, that is a 2-year initiative of Representative Grijalva from Arizona that is focusing on an environmental justice for all bill that hopes to really rein in some of these problems I think that we're having around jurisdictional boundaries and legislators saying they have no power. We need to empower the people. So if you would behoove me, I would love to be able to just read my remarks. They're less than 5 minutes. My name is Ean Thomas Tafoya, and I'm with the Colorado Latino Forum, a nonprofit based in Denver, Colorado. The mission of the Colorado Latino Forum, or CLF, is to increase the political, social, educational, and economic strength of Latinas and Latinos. I'm currently the co-chair and leadership of this organization, but I spent many years as the chair of the Environmental Justice Committee. In this role, I've traveled throughout Colorado to hear directly from those impacted by industry and government policy. We work with community members to solve problems and to bring their voices to the halls of power. Currently, our board has 11 leaders, all have run for office. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge that there are many people that called Colorado home. The Cheyenne, Arapaho, Apache, Ute, Pueblo, Shoshone, Hopi, Comanche, Lakota, all have historical connections to what we now call Colorado. Most of these nations have no land in Colorado. This is an injustice. Why did so many people have a relationship with this land? Because we are the headwater state. 18 states in Mexico are connected to us by water. Protecting the headwaters is a responsibility that all Coloradans share. Now, my ancestors are Hickory Apache from the headwaters of the Rio Grande, and I was raised in a proud Chicano household that embraced our connection to place and understood we must organize for change, and that mutual aid is where we must begin to transform our society. Understanding colonization and forced assimilation is important to the legacy of supremacy and the environmental injustices that exist in Colorado. From the manifestation of supremacy, aka destiny, for hard rock mining, to current agricultural labor exploitation, Colorado has a legacy of pollution and human rights violations. Denver was one of the original forced relocation sites, which ultimately brought Native voices together, and they shared wisdom and resiliency, resulting in progress being made via the American Indian and Chicano movements in Colorado in the 70s and 80s. It is in this space that the original leaders of the CLF were educated, and these elders now embrace youthful leaders in our pursuit for justice of our communities. My birthday is Earth Day, and I've always considered myself an environmentalist, but my journey to this EJ space begins with the widening of Interstate 70 through a Latino community for the second time. As communities around the world are embracing removal of urban highways due to pollution, climate concerns, and price tags, Colorado has chosen to double down on one of the most expensive public works transportation projects in Colorado history. Billions for 2 miles of highways dug through Superfund sites with hydrology directly adjacent to the South Platte River, which connects to the Mississippi River. This project took hundreds of homes in one of the highest home ownership Latino communities in the city. And to top it all off, a playground and a park for a school on top of a highway without venting stacks because it conveniently was a few feet short of the requirement. Together with the community, CLF brought NEPA, Clean Air Act, and Title VI cases against this project. In the end, we settled, and now we have seed money for a cumulative and comprehensive pollution assessment, a nation-leading effort to understand what is happening in one of the most polluted zip codes in America, so we can affect policy to improve our public health. The legacy of redlining is connected to the same supremacy that found success to widen this highway has resulted in the placement of massive marijuana grows, a dog food plant that smells up the whole neighborhood, a refinery, asphalt facilities, recycling and industrial facilities. And now get this, there are now plans on the table to widen another highway, I-270, that intersects this community. From here, my community involvement grew to fighting these other facilities and eventually around the state. We've had success in passing laws and pushing for larger, but still meager settlement payments that all too often get greenwashed as corporate community support. This one I copied from you, Lucy. I want to be clear, justice is not charity. These mandated projects shouldn't be used as examples of corporate responsibility. Now, Colorado is unique because 2/5 of it is protected land, at least from development of cities. But what we do see is a gross mismanagement of public lands resulting in fracking, water and air degradation, road construction, and mining. Recently, I visited a legal clear cutting of a road in a roadless area of a national forest by Arch Coal. This road was constructed while neighbors were directed to stay at home during the first months of COVID. It's a glaring example of corporations embracing the Trump administration's support for non-enforcement during COVID. In the same rural communities, organic farming is threatened by fracking adjacent to their reservoir, and a resort town based on the healing powers of hot springs is threatened by strip mining for raw materials for concrete tied to the development of highways and gentrification in Denver. I want to be clear that segregation in the mountains is even more pronounced between low-income workers, migrants, and people of color relegated to down valley communities and the negative impacts of pollution. CLF has fought for a translation corps to be developed for our state. During COVID, it became clear that local communities are not capable of providing public health and social welfare information to all residents in their community. We're also lacking public transportation access to these beautiful rural communities and parks. I've been an advocate and an organizer for transit to open space, including Rocky Mountain National Park. I tell my friends, if you can go from Fresno to Yosemite on a bus, we can too. In closing, CLF lends its support to the Environmental Justice for All bill, which addresses the many concerns we've raised here. And to the mothers that wake in the middle of the night with their children gasping for air, we hear you and we stand with you. To the workers that dedicated their lives to making goods for our society, but were exposed to toxic pollution and are now ill, we hear you and we stand with you. Those that are tired of the old ways and seek a renewed and remediated future, the Colorado Latino Forum is your friend. And how can we lift your voice? We fight for all and with all that seek justice. Frontlines are fighting back, and we walk with our ancestors because we are their wildest dreams.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you. You know, you mentioned zip codes being determinative. One of the communities in Denver is potentially one of the most polluted communities in the country. And I've been learning myself of late about how zip codes are determinative of educational outcomes and health outcomes in our country. And just mindful of the overlapping systems of systemic injustice here. And that's prelude to my question, which is, you know, some would argue that Polis has done some good things on climate around some coal-fired power plants, but it's so glaringly obvious that he's got a massive blind spot around the intersection between climate justice and, again, health outcomes, educational outcomes. And I just wonder if all three of you could speak to the blind spot that Polis has and how important it is to continue to put pressure on Polis to address these fundamental inequities that are based on systems and structures that are fundamentally racist.
I think it's ironic that he doesn't see racism because he gets so upset when people bring racism at him for being Jewish, especially during COVID, in this comparison to Nazis. You know, we're talking about our indigenous statues or statues that are hurtful to indigenous people. He can't seem to see how the cavalry were our Nazis. He came to my community when he was running for office and spoke to Spanish about cancer in my community, yet allowed the project to go through. There's drilling next to Latino schools in Belo Romero, where we bring it to him knowing that the children were exposed and the teachers were exposed. He does nothing. When we protest him, like I did in January, for singing I was arrested. When we bring these issues about COVID and highway construction and what's fair for people during COVID and respite that these communities deserve, silence. Now, he might be able to pat himself on his back when the big greens celebrate him, but my community knows who he really is.
What would you add, Lucy? And I'd like to bring your voice into the room too, Jeremy, in a moment.
Yeah, I think you didn't even introduce yourself, Jeremy. So I think you need to introduce yourself next.
Oh, people know who I am. I don't know. I'm the Climate Energy Program Director for WildEarth Guardians, and it's an honor to be here. It's an honor to have Ean and Lucy here, who I've been working with a lot lately, both on issues related directly to the Suncor oil refinery north of Denver, and also how that relates to climate action here in Colorado. But yeah, Lucy, I love to hear some of your perspective on that too, just where Governor Polis seems to be at right now. He seems to talk a good talk when it comes to climate and when it comes to justice and protecting people, but it doesn't seem like he's willing to walk the walk. And for like you, Lucy, and others, in the shadow of the Suncor oil refinery and these other industrial facilities, I mean, it's just not acceptable. It's not okay. Like there are people who are feeling the impact right now today, and the governor's failure to take action on climate and on health. I mean, it's almost like it's willful climate denial in a way, willful denial of a systematic racism.
It's all about the money, okay? It's actually about it's all about the money. I sometimes I don't want to tell my kids that we are not worth it sometimes, but I always say this. Even Ian, we both ran for office. I've learned a lot. I think running for office prepared me for what I'm doing here also now this year, because there's a difference between a public servant and a politician. Okay, I see a public servant growing with their community, not leaving their community behind and doing shit like what's going on now. A politician always has some kind of special interest. It's either glory for themselves, it's some kind of glory, it's some kind of economic gain, or a special interest, which is dinero, money. So that's what really motivates a lot of people. At least I saw that. Even running as a candidate, there's a lot of things that I didn't understand until I ran for office. And it doesn't matter sometimes what color we are, because even here in Commerce City, we have a lot of people that look just like me and received money from Suncor, and to throw their fiestas or to do some kind of events here. Suncor sponsors a lot of people like me, so we could just keep it quiet until so that's really what I feel about. I would say that Mr. Polis is a politician. That's what I would say.
I just want to add, I mean, in relation to the lawsuits that have been filed, and I think this goes back to your question before I read my comments, 1261 is about improving people's lives. And it's about getting us on track with our climate goals, because we know that climate justice is racial justice. We know that when we shut down these facilities, the air quality and the lives of people improve now, and the safety and the long-term safety and resiliency of our community is improved. And that is even more meaningful for us, because when shit goes wrong, we get the worst of it. Whether it's flooding or COVID, you name it, our system is set up that we are bearing that brunt. And I think the reason that Suncor enters into the conversation is Polis could do something meaningful right now. He could just start right now and say, we're going to negotiate the end of Suncor. We know that we have to get there, just like we know we have to get there with the coal plants. It's the same concept, and it's about justice, right? Like we don't want austerity for these workers either. We want safety for these workers. We want them to continue on with their lives. No one wants to end up unhoused. Nobody wants that. The people who are living there that are sick. And so, the other thing I'd say is, if he was really making progress towards climate justice, would we see these appointments to the Air Quality Control Commission of these people who come from these industry sectors while removing environmentalists that have fought so hard to protect us?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Just for context there, what Ian just mentioned. So one particular member of the Air Quality Control Commission, Auden Schendler, who is the Vice President for Sustainability at Aspen Ski Company, very outspoken on climate issues, very much pushing, trying to move the ball forward in his capacity as an air commissioner. And the governor didn't reappoint him. And instead, the governor appointed commissioners who have no track record on climate, one of which a union representative, and I think that's important, but I also know that there's very close connections between the union that he represents and the oil and gas industry, and also a former city mayor of Broomfield who used to work with the oil and gas industry. So it's very, I mean, it's a little frustrating, but we also have to scratch your head going, what is Governor Polis thinking? Is he for real? Is he actually going to lead on climate, or is it just all talk? And if it's all talk, then that's dangerous. That is extremely dangerous. And it just emphasizes more than ever, like, why we need to be as aggressive as possible in our advocacy, and not only filing lawsuits, but showing up and protesting and rallying the troops and getting more people than ever engaged and outspoken on climate.
I want to interject now just for our audience. We love questions. I'd love the opportunity to, I see we've had a few comments and a request, but love questions. We'll take them both when they're asked and at the end of our hour. So for those listening, please share questions if you've got them. I was wondering if you, Ean, Lucy, Jeremy, could provide the listeners some context on House Bill 1261, which Polis signed into law, and what exactly it requires the state to do, and how Polis is measuring up against what the law requires.
I will say this. For us, it was a hollow victory. And from here, I will pass it over to Ean, because y'all know a lot more. You guys are so much technical than me and understand that. But for me, it was a hollow victory, and it's a start. It's a start. Everything that began this year, it's a start, because it's 100 years of, like you said, 90 years of environmental injustice for these communities. Ean.
I would just add that this conversation that you're saying about hollow victories is something that we hear a lot. If these people are already being provided permits that are legal requirements and they're consistently violating them, then the laws are meaningless. If people can just recklessly pollute and continue business as usual and pay to play and meager small amounts, as I said in my testimony, then the people in our community stop believing and stop having faith, and they don't want to participate. And that's again why I talk about how we turn to mutual aid, because we see that. 1261 putting us on a path, and there's a couple bills that work together, but it puts us on a path to figure out how we're going to get to 100% renewable energy and how we're going to parse out all these different sectors. And there's an emphasis on helping and targeting disproportionately impacted vulnerable communities first. There could be no other place in any definition Suncor would fall under it. And any other definition 80216 falls under. It doesn't matter if you're using a definition from 1990, which still isn't very good, and we're trying to update now from executive orders from Bill Clinton. This community fits into that. And so, I was mentioning about missing deadlines and the lawsuit, right, that WildEarth Guardians is involved in, and there's another lawsuit from a different coalition. And the whole concept is like, if the legislature passes laws and then the executive branch doesn't meet them, please tell me how we're not behaving like a Trump administration.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, Ian. And that's really the rub here is House Bill 1261, really set us on the path to meet some, I mean, we call them bold greenhouse gas emission reductions, but really it's what the science says we have to do. 26% reduction in emissions by 2025, a 50% reduction by 2030, and then a 90% reduction by 2050. Although a lot of people clarify that actually by 2050, we should be achieving a 100% emission reduction. We're supposed to meet these milestones to ensure the kind of climate progress we need to make to keep temperatures in check. A companion piece of legislation passed with House Bill 1261 also said that the administration had to propose regulations that put us on track to meet those targets by July 1st, 2020. Before July 1st, all the reports indicated we weren't on track in terms of the emission reductions that were both being put in place and that were projected to be put in place. And then July 1st, 2020 passed, and there were no proposed regulations. And so we did file suit against the Polis administration, as there does seem to be this this sense that somehow they're above the law. And you know, that's disturbing enough, but it's all the more frightening because House Bill 1261, as you mentioned, Ian, just very explicitly said that as we reduce greenhouse gas emissions, the priority areas to reduce emissions need to be in communities that are disproportionately impacted by these polluters. And as you say, 80216, Commerce City, North Denver, that is where you need to be focusing your efforts on reducing emissions first and foremost. And that is absolutely not happening. And it's not to say that you know, retiring coal-fired power plants isn't a good thing. And the governor and his administration have been working with utilities here to broker the retirement of coal-fired power plants. But where's the justice? You know, where's the justice focus? And when is the governor going to start brokering the retirement of the Suncor oil refinery and other industrial polluters that are fueling our climate crisis as much as coal-fired power plants are?
I'd like to circle back on Polis. I see we have a question from one of our audience members. I'll read it. It's from Jill Holane. So do you feel the other candidate for governor last year would be doing any better? And she follows that with a comment: we, the people, must hold all accountable, and we must be verbal on these issues en masse. We must demand that all are held responsible politically and legally. Just anyone want to respond to the question about other candidate doing better?
I'm not sure what she means by other candidate. Perhaps she means the Republican. I think we've seen the Republican leadership, Neville in particular, who said in his remarks at opening legislature this year that he would do everything in his power to stop climate alarmists. Absolutely insane, driving off a cliff at 1,000 miles an hour. But if we're talking about other primary candidates, absolutely. There are more people in our community who would definitely be pushing for us harder, but we don't have campaign finance reform. When a millionaire can come in and buy an election, or millionaires can come and buy an election for a person, we're going to continue to get pay to play. And like Lucy says, it's where the money is. On the local level here in Denver and now in Aurora, we've worked to take money out of elections. We've worked to try to find public financing for people. You know, until we achieve that, it's hard to say who will act in any good way. Because again, Lucy's saying, are they politicians or are they civil servants?
Yeah. So just focusing now on still on Polis, I have sensed from my view south in New Mexico that he's done pretty well in handling the COVID crisis. Could be wrong about that, but maybe not. To the extent that he has, what about what he's done there could be relevant to these issues?
All right, I'm just gonna go ahead and say he's not done a good job for the Latino community. 1 out of 6 Latinos can work from home. What about the people who are working outdoors? You refuse to shut down the construction industry. You refuse to shut down a highway, even though the evidence came out with Harvard. We had a Harvard study saying the link between small particulate matter. And we wrote countless letters with hundreds of legislators and community organizations asking him to do the right thing. Didn't happen. Now, as far as community testing and some of these other things, yeah, I guess maybe some of that's going on a better way. But if you're a Latino who works in construction and your wife is a janitor and your kids are at home with your elders and you can't even breathe the air in your own house or in your own neighborhood, while cities are shutting down roads in white neighborhoods so that these people could walk in social distance, but we couldn't get 2 months of respite from a construction project? Absolutely not. When I talk to my members of my community, they are not pleased. And then if we want to go to his response around housing, he showed up with 120 state police officers for a homeless encampment. He refuses to place people in housing, instead wants to force them into shelters, giant open air rooms for people to contract COVID. I do not see that leadership being strong in our sense. And the Latino Forum actually had to push him to be transparent about his Economic Recovery Council, which was a meeting of who's who in energy and all these other industries, but who wasn't at the table? Us. They didn't record these meetings either, so we can't core them and we can't see them. But I can look at their notes. It took us weeks to even push him enough to get the list of the people. And they told us, oh, they weren't big meetings. They were big meetings, we found out.
Yeah. So what, I mean, it's clear endless pressure endlessly applied is what we have to do to move Polis and other people. What are we broadly doing, and what more can we ask of the people on this call and others to ensure that Polis is responsive to these critical issues?
We need to educate to regulate. This is something, you know, I run, my program is to educate to regulate. Just like me, honestly, I'm still learning. Again, I'm not an expert. I'm learning. One reason is because I didn't think a person like me can run for office, right? And just like Ean said, I actually lost for 150 votes, which is, I lost because I'm poor. That's why I lost. The people that are now in our main leadership are not even from here. Okay, they were literally put there from oil and gas. In fact, one of them was part of my oil and gas focus group here in Commerce City. So I found out it is our government is sold out. They're bought out by corporations, by industries. Really, I always, unless I'm in like forums like this, working with people like Ean and Jeremy, and a lot of the organizations I work with now, you know, under God's grace, I get to work with also Physicians for Social Responsibility, bringing electrification, bringing solutions. So I always say where the problem is, that's where the solution lies. The problem is communities like mine, okay, which are always left behind, okay? It's no good for me to know that Boulder or some of these rich communities have electric cars and solar and all that when we cannot afford it, okay? But we have a monster like this next door to us in Commerce City, or in, you know, Greeley, which is Bella Romero. We need to educate our community. We need to understand in every aspect, you know, youth, moms, fathers, to understand what's going on. Because one thing, climate crisis is real, okay? The world is not gonna get any better. It's not gonna go back. It's not gonna be the same ever. Like COVID is just the beginning. We know that the North Pole, everything is melting up there. Worse things, more viruses we are not even gonna, our minds are not, and our science is not gonna catch up ever. It's gonna get worse. We need to educate our community so we could save the damn planet, honestly. And I'm saying the damned planet because we are damned with these industries continuing to destroy the planet that my children are supposed to inherit. You know, we already took it from somebody else. You know what I mean? So we need to educate our community, like Suncor, self-regulation. This is what for 100 years they've done. That is what our policies and our legislations and our lawyers and our representatives and our politicians, because they've all been politicians. None of them have been community servants. Self-regulation for 100 years almost. So that's slapping their own hand. Okay, now are we, the voters, continuing to put those kind of people in office, you know, to continue to kill my children? No. You know, that's why I do ask people to step it up, you know, stand up for yourself. And you know, Ean, and it's just one of us, right? One Jeremy, one Ean. We need all of you guys. We need everybody, not only here in Commerce City, not only here in Colorado, all over the world. If you're in California, wherever, I mean, right now, Zoom is allowing us to unite virtually. We need to save the planet. This is what we got to do, because what we're doing here with the fracking and all this contamination, at the end of the day, it's destroying the planet. And our children are not going to have what we had growing up. You know what I mean? So yes, thank you. Sorry.
Yep. What are your thoughts, Ean, about what we can do to get Polis to do what you said he's got to do, which is to use his political capital to broker the kind of agreements that he's brokering with utilities to basically shut Suncor down?
We can't get distracted. You know, sports are coming back, all these things that are supposed to make us feel more at ease. The world is bubbling up and the energy is there and the youth is there. And I know our elders have been leading the way for a long time. We support you. And I know it's harder for you to get in the streets right now because of COVID, but support your niños. Support people getting out there and getting in the streets. Support writing letters. Pick up the phone and or pen an op-ed or call 5 of your friends or post on Facebook. The power is in the people, and we're seeing it because we're seeing at the lower levels in particular across this country, and people are winning. People are winning on these ideas and these values that Lucy and I are talking about of health and wellness, right? And climate justice and a Green New Deal. I do see a message here that I just want to address really quick about the Attorney General asking to remove Polis's name from the suit. Okay, why don't you go and sue a company who's poisoning people, Phil Weiser? Why is this the maneuver and this is the politics that you're choosing? Because when my community comes to vote and we hear that you're not standing with us, but you're standing with those that are standing in our way, we won't forget. And don't forget we're the fastest growing population in Colorado. Don't forget that we're the largest voting bloc of minorities right now, right? I think people will be coming back to ask us for favors later, and we have long memories.
And I just want to add too, I mean, absolutely, like keeping the pressure on, upping it as much as possible, not losing sight of justice here. And I think that's the great thing is realizing that, the social justice dimension here is so intertwined with protecting our environment. We can't protect the environment without social justice. We can't have social justice if we're not protecting the environment. And I think you're seeing a growing awareness and a realization that we have to hold Governor Polis accountable to those ends. And I think I will acknowledge the environmental community in Colorado. I think a lot of advocates have not acknowledged that and have not worked to hold governors accountable to that effect. Our previous governor, Governor Hickenlooper, took the environmental community for granted, and many groups let that happen. And I think with Polis, we're waking up to the fact that we can't let that happen again. We absolutely can't. And he may have some good principles and he may have some good ideas, but it's still up to the people to hold him accountable. He is a politician, as Lucy said, and we can't lose sight of that fact. And, especially because, like, as Ean said, the governor moved to dismiss himself from a lawsuit WildEarth Guardians filed over the state's failure to meet their climate deadlines. And, just the act of doing that, it speaks volumes to where the governor is at, that he feels so strongly that he should not be a defendant in a lawsuit like this, that he is actually taking steps to extricate himself and to basically say, it's not my job, it's somebody else's responsibility. And for the Attorney General to go along with that, it's surprising, and we won't forget about that. As Ean said, people will remember which side the governor was on when it came time to meet the greatest environmental crisis of our generation.
I just want to go back to I want to say one thing here. In some ways, it's more difficult to hold people accountable when they're closer aligned to your values. Often when party politics comes into it, it's a lot easier to be gloves off with a Republican than it is a Democrat, or just generally people in the community. We personally approach it as though there is no party for the environment, right? Like everybody should be on it. We should be putting conservation back in conservative. Like, I don't know. No, they're the same root word. And this just crossed my mind. We were talking earlier, do I think another person would have done better? Well, if Joe Salazar was their attorney general, I think there'd be a lot more corporate polluters being held accountable.
Yeah, hear.
Yeah, it's so true that I think it's been one of the greatest tactical strategic failures of the environmental community to align itself, I'm talking big green, to align itself with the Democratic Party and to silence criticism of Democratic leaders when they've failed to govern with compassion and with boldness to address these issues. So we've got less than 5 minutes now. I'm curious, I have a random question, but I'd also like to hear closing thoughts from each of you. Is there a way to hold, we're obviously targeting Polis for good reason. What can we do more to really erode the social license of Suncor in federal courts and state courts, in the court of public opinion? I know it's already happening, so I want to acknowledge all of the work that's being done, but I'm feeling myself just a sense of deeper outrage about Suncor. And so it's a genuine question. What else can we do to undermine their credibility as a means of expediting the shuttering of the plant. And again, making them a target in addition to Polis.
I see there's a couple reporters here on the line. I would love it if the reporters would start pulling the strings on the dark money and the dollars that are going into the people who are remaining silent. I had an op-ed that was published just a couple of weeks ago with the Latino Forum, who's been part of an air toxics coalition for years to try to rein in Suncor. Went after Ed Perlmutter because he has been silent. Lucy, does Ed Perlmutter call you? No, but you're a leader in the community who's fighting this fight.
He did endorse me last year, though. I mean, I think that was and he knew my values, and he knew what I was complaining about. So, I mean, you know, again, I don't, I'm not everybody's cup of tea. I know that for sure. I do want to say that oil and gas it's a mafia. You know, we are fighting. I mean, this is something that we are here in the United States, but even in, you know, we have American companies fracking the shit out of Mexico and third world countries that are worse off than us. You know, I mean, my family's lost land in Mexico to American industries. So I mean, it starts world wars. You know what I mean? We have even our military, they're mercenaries. They're not there for us. They're there for the corporations. You know what I mean? That's what they're there. And I know because I lived in a military base. And even my people that I lived with, you know, they were the ones that told me that, like, Lucy, we're not there to protect you, trust me. So, I mean, you know, it's sometimes I told Ian, I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel sometimes, you know what I mean? But I think renewable energy, sustainability, like Ian was saying earlier, and Jeremy, we need to bring, you know, there's 500 jobs supposedly that thing will affect, and all these billions of dollars. We need to bring solutions. We need to bring solar. We need to bring that more accessible, more affordable to communities like mine. We need to not make them so like we don't need it. Like, we need gas for everything. We need gas for everything. Like, when I talk to my community, like, they think it's impossible to shut down Suncor. They think it's impossible that we cannot live without gas. Then you know, I see there's electrification, solar, wind. There's all these other options that up to now, I always say, I mean, I could go for a burger anywhere I want, pretty much, you know, even at a Mexican restaurant. But I don't have a choice in energy. That is pretty messed up there. That is a mafia, okay? That is like really a mafia.
Yeah, we're going up against the most powerful industry in the world. I want to be mindful of time. Just a quick question from another participant. Are there any upcoming protest or direct action events that activists can partake in to draw more attention to these issues of environmental racism and climate justice? Just a quick answer from either one of the three of you, and then I want to close.
Well, there are daily weekday actions that are taking place on Excel Energy. It's called Excel is Dirty, 12 to 1 o'clock. They're dance parties sometimes they're painting parties, but it's 100 days of action for 100 days of renewable energy. It's, you know, our power supply company is buying products. You know, there's also, you know, everyone's about your personal choice, but we have to take on these big industry polluters too. And if you're really wanting to get out in action, I think they're on day 38. So I think you have like 60 more days that you could get out there and you could protest. I know there's a climate strike that's coming up here. I think it's like September 25th. I just got notification of it. And then I think if you really want to support climate justice and racial justice, then get out there and support the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah, absolutely. Want to echo that. And I also want to say, you know, stay plugged into social media, like WildEarth Guardian's Facebook page, GreenLatinos, 350 Colorado, a great partner of ours, doing some great work too. We're starting to mobilize more. It was, you know, kind of tough there in light of the pandemic, but we're starting to get out more, starting to make our voices heard and to really confront, you know, speak truth to power and confront things head on. So just stay plugged in. Can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah, great. Well, I'm going to close just with two thoughts. First, my gratitude to you, Ian and Lucy, and of course for you, Jeremy. You're all warriors in my mind, and I'm grateful. And my heart goes out to you, Lucy, in particular, for the struggle that you're facing on a day in and day out basis. I want to talk with Jeremy after this call about how we can support you more. And the second thing is, I was thinking about this last night, apocalypse. We're all feeling it, like the fires in California, the images coming out of the West Coast have created that. And it has a scary feeling. But someone told me about apocalypse and its meaning. It comes from the Greek and it means to uncover, disclose, and reveal. And I think part of what all of you are doing, and I mean the three of you, is our uncovering, pulling back the veil on injustice. And so let's reframe apocalypse as the moment in which times are shifting, the truth is being revealed, and new opportunities arise. And so thank you all for being, again, warriors and truth tellers and helping us bring to light the ugly truth and allow for new opportunities to emerge. So, and thank you for all of the participants for joining in.
Thank you for including me also. Gracias, Jeremy. Inclusion matters. So
yes.
I thank you so much for including us. Gracias.
All right.
It's our honor. Thank you, Lucy. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you all. Take care.
Thanks, John.
Yep. Bye-bye.